Mass UFO sightings have been experienced around the globe for thousands of years. Today, they are at an all-time high.
I got 4 of them. Major sighting here.
They're done hiding.
This thing was humongous.
You don't put something half a mile wide, covered in lights, in the sky if you don't want it to be seen.
What's the purpose? What's the mission?
And why are governments going to great lengths to hide this information?
This is as up close and personal as you can get.
It's such an eerie kind of feeling.
It was an overwhelming dread, and I had trouble summoning the courage to run.
UFO encounters involving hundreds of people seeing the same terrifying craft are happening all around us.
There was something in the sky.
There is credibility in numbers.
We are now closer than ever before to learning the truth about alien craft invading our skies.
Why would we be all there is? And if there are others, wouldn't you want to know?
Witnessing a UFO alone is a horrifying experience.
Interacting with other beings, other realities that may not be explainable easily triggers fear.
What happens when that fear takes hold of hundreds, even thousands of people?
I got 4 of them. Major sighting here.
Emotions run high.
It's like, there's no way I'm seeing what I think I'm seeing.
And there's nowhere to hide.
I felt like if I would run, it would notice me, and whatever it was going to do, it would do.
With a large group of people, you're really not afforded that opportunity to push this out of your mind. It forces you to confront this reality that's not supposed to be there.
I got the 3rd one popping.
There's one behind the chimney. One just flared up.
Mass sightings are cases on steroids where we don't just have 1 or 2 individuals. We may have dozens, if not hundreds, perhaps even thousands of people encountering something in the same time frame.
Will the public get out of control here? And will this devolve into genuine fear?
One of the biggest sightings in UFO history happened here in the desert state of Arizona. But what hundreds of people saw was no mirage.
This was something phenomenal. No doubt in my mind, it changed a lot of lives.
Over the years, Arizona's otherworldly landscape has been a backdrop for bizarre, unwanted, even supernatural encounters.
There's a lot of claims that out in sort of the wilderness around Phoenix, you have odd stories of people encountering strange anomalies, allegations of interdimensional portals, monsters, various cryptids.
In March 1997, one of the most terrifying encounters yet stops the bustling city of Phoenix dead in its tracks. It was an incredible UFO event that would become known as the Phoenix Lights.
I got 4 of them. Major sighting here.
There aren't many heroes in this story, but there are a few, and one of them is named Francis Barwood.
Francis was a member of the Phoenix City Council at the time, and the only one willing to get to the bottom of what really happened that night.
It's all lit up. It was about 10 miles away. It was moving from the southeast to the west-northwest. Traveling approximately 1,000 miles per hour. Just an outline that was rather almost translucent, as if there wasn't as much reflection coming off.
I talked to over 700 people, and all those people described exactly the same thing. And they said, this thing was humongous. It was something bigger than a football field. They said it was triangular shaped. They all said it had like gaseous lights in it. And they said that it was totally silent, a dull gray, and it just moved slow. How can you get that many people to describe the same thing? They went to the sheriff, they went to the mayor, They went to all the other council members, and nobody would talk to them. Here's this mystery that went over Arizona and Phoenix, and I figured I'll get an answer.
Frances Barwood asks City Council to launch a formal investigation into the Phoenix Lights incident. But at the time, the topic of UFOs is a hushed secret.
After the meeting, one of the city managers came over to me and he said, "You shouldn't have asked that question." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because the mayor told everybody not to talk about it."
Pressure was on her not to pursue this. And this is not the only time that this type of thing's ever happened. You're going to open a door and you may not know how to close that door. And you may not be able to answer the questions that you open up.
Frances isn't the first to encounter a UFO sighting kept under wraps. This has been happening for decades around the country.
New Mexico is certainly, I think, a special place in the history of UFO lore and also in the history of government secrecy.
One of the earliest mass sightings on record, now known as the Farmington Armada, reveals these shocking truths.
Hundreds and hundreds of people saw hundreds of UFOs over their town and in the general vicinity.
These were spherical or oval-shaped objects that were intelligently maneuvering across the sky. It had to be one heck of a show for the people on the ground.
There are a lot of sightings by individuals with fairly good perception of lights moving in the sky, objects seen during the day that didn't seem to be balloons and stars and aircraft, seemed to be something else. These sightings really weren't investigated.
There was that concern that the public might react with mass hysteria if they even thought that extraterrestrials were real.
Nearly 5 decades later, Frances Barwood finds history repeating itself with the Phoenix Lights sighting.
Why don't they want to know what this was that went over Arizona and over Phoenix?
No. They're lined up in a pattern, man. There's geometry behind this.
I think there's a lot of fear, so I think there's then this desire to ignore it altogether.
But for those who saw the chilling event, the haunting memories are impossible to ignore. Among them is the Lee family, who shared their story on the local news.
You just didn't know what to do. You know, it was just like, my God, how big is this thing?
It was a giant V, all right? And the right side of the V went over us. The left side was like a couple blocks over it.
I can't imagine what it must have been like to be in Phoenix on that day and having these things hover right above you for a long time.
Footage of the mysterious Phoenix Lights finally surfaces, validating hundreds of terrifying truths that Frances has been hearing from eyewitnesses.
Whoa, look at them all.
I got that one on video.
There's just 4 of them. Look at there's 3 of them all together.
I was watching these videos and I called my husband. I said, "You need to see this."
Bill, over here, there's 4. Holy.
Oh, you got
No.
That was a rude awakening. Something happened. It was not ours. I want to know whose it is. And I think everybody else that has seen it or heard of it, they all want to know too.
The massive object didn't look or behave like anything from our planet.
We're not hearing the sounds of any propulsion. There was nothing. There was absolute silence, which is unnerving.
I think people must have felt like they were in an otherworldly experience altogether. Everybody must have been affected very deeply by the experience.
And what you have there is a massive string of lights, maybe a mile, over the city of Phoenix at night. Stationary, solid, not moving. It's like, what could this be?
With so many witnesses, there's only 2 possibilities. Either what was seen was truly unexplainable, or it has an explanation because we know something was there. They're not crazy.
The Air Force came out and said that they were running exercises and operations And that's what people saw after the incident.
That particular night, they flew 8 A-10s out of Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, taking off about 8:30 at night.
To me, that's just the most lame attempt to explain it away. It's like, the military baked it, the press served it, and the public ate it.
Haunted by the voices of more than 700 witnesses, training flares are not an explanation Frances Barwood is ready to stomach.
It's still puzzling to me because why did everybody act like sheep? And, it's okay, we won't talk about it, so they didn't. It's like, why?
Then one evening, Frances receives a mysterious call that changes the course of her investigation. The voice on the line belongs to an eyewitness named Richard Curtis.
He was a retired veteran. He didn't know who else to call. He said he didn't want to call the government. And he says, I took detailed videos of it and I have them.
We've entered a new era. UFO encounters are now seen and understood as real phenomena. One-on-one eyewitness accounts and government documents detail sightings of strange and incredible craft with capabilities that are out of this world. But no encounter offers more insight into UFOs than one that is witnessed by hundreds.
Mass sightings are the jewels in the crown of ufology because of the massive amount of data they provide.
But this valuable information comes at a high price to those who come face to face with the alien craft.
In a blink of an eye, an entire community can be upended. Suddenly, their whole lives are changed. That's monumental.
Frances Barwood was determined to get answers for her community, no matter the cost.
To her everlasting credit, she was brave enough to say, you know what, let's find out what this thing was. She was out there twisting in the wind on her own, very vulnerable, very exposed.
The phone call from Richard Curtis may be the key to unlocking the mystery behind the Phoenix lights.
I got a call from Richard Curtis. He explained that he had professional equipment. He wanted me to know that he had these really good videos that showed the entire shape of everything. Up till then, there were some pictures of objects and you could see kind of lights and everything, but you couldn't see the detail. And he had gotten the detail. He said you can see the shape. You can see how big it was in comparison to the surrounding buildings and everything. He described that the lights were like gaseous. He was so excited about that he had gotten all this on video.
What's on those tapes could be life-changing for Barwood and those she is seeking answers for.
And I said, can you get the copy to my office? And he said he would.
Days go by with no sign of the tapes.
I thought, oh, he probably made this up. He didn't have video, all this stuff. A week later, he called me up again at home. And he said, what did I think of these videos? And I said, I did not get them.
Richard Curtis tells Frances that 2 men from her office had already paid him a visit, dressed head to toe in black.
They came in, they asked where Richard Curtis's room was. They told him, they went up. He said they looked similar to each other. They were in 3-piece black suits. That was odd, being that it was like 110 or something like that out. He said to them, are you from Barwood's office? And they said yes. They said, did you make the copies? And he said, no, I haven't had a chance. He goes, we'll make the copies. So they took them. And so he gave them the videos and thinking they were going to bring them to my office. I don't have guys in my office, I have all women. I have no idea who these two guys were. It sounds so like bizarre. Nothing made sense to me.
Who were these mysterious men? And why are those tapes so important to them?
There are so many stories around the world about odd-looking people, sometimes very pale, dressed in black suits, black hats, who either take evidence or show up at a witness's door, make them feel uneasy, tell them to be quiet, intimidate them.
On the basis of what happened with Richard Curtis and Francis Barwood, you could say this is a Men in Black encounter. I mean, absolutely. What the Men in Black represent is a whole other question that is a harder one to answer. Are they human? Are they not human? Are they part of a secret government agency?
Some ufologists have said these were aliens trying to stop my quest, but others have speculated that no, it was actually members of the government trying to control the narrative of what was going on in the skies.
One thing is for sure. The Men in Black did not want those tapes to reach Barwood's desk. If what Richard filmed really does reveal that extraterrestrial beings are behind the Phoenix lights, what does that mean for us?
The only thing I could think of is they're more advanced than we are. They're smarter than we are. Maybe our government and military are afraid of losing power and control.
With the tapes gone, Frances and the hundreds of eyewitnesses relying on her are no closer to getting answers.
Why isn't everybody saying, we need to know what this is?
Frances continues to look for answers. Across the continent, other UFO eyewitnesses have been waiting decades for the truth.
A long time ago now, I was 12 years old. I was supposed to be in bed. It was about 10:20 at night. The last thing on my mind that day was UFOs, but that was about to change. At that time, my bedroom window was right by the edge of the waterfront. And lo and behold, here comes this orange orb. Basically just an orange ball. And this was just moving along the coastline like this. Well, this was too much for me to ignore, and although I was supposed to be in bed, I can remember, it's very strange, I grabbed the jacket, ran down the stairs. My mother and father saying, where are you going? I said, I've got to go to the corner store. I said, I've got to get something. I got a bad stomachache. And they're like, whoa, stop, no. And I was out the door. And I ran down the hill to the waterfront, which was just a few blocks away from our residence. And that's when the fear hit. You look around, you realize you're totally alone there on the waterfront. And, you know I'm already in trouble when I go home. And now there's something I can't understand coming closer to me.
Sightings of strange, ominous, and unexplained phenomena are happening more and more.
The best way I can describe it was an overwhelming dread.
Every haunting encounter opens the door to the possibility of extraterrestrial life among us. And every mass sighting makes that terrifying thought impossible to ignore.
When you come across a UFO, the reaction, it's awe, it's disbelief. Is this for real? Did I just see this? The fear kicks in. What if something happens to me?
These very thoughts and emotions were coursing through Chris Stiles on the night in October 1967 when he came face to face with a UFO.
Silently just drifting only about 10 feet above the water, tracing the shoreline. You had this fear inside. You're not thinking in words, but I can remember the feeling. What would it be now, 53 years ago? It was like, you're thinking at the time, if I run, it'll be like when you run from an aggressive dog. That was my introduction to the UFO phenomena, up close and quite scary.
But Chris Stiles wasn't the only one introduced to UFOs that cool October night. Almost 300 kilometers away, just an hour after his sighting, the residents of the tiny fishing village of Shag Harbor got the biggest scare of their lives.
Looked like a flaming ball of light, flew over the town.
No one really could identify what this was, but it was odd.
Around 11:20 p.m., the sky was so clear and transparent you could see the faintest of stars. The moon had already sat some hours before. People who were outside at the time, they were mostly out in cars driving around, young people with girlfriends, people just with time to kill, insomniacs, whatever.
Among them is fisherman Laurie Wickens, out for a drive with some friends.
Laurie Wickens was a young fellow at the time. He was out with some friends of his. They were just driving up and down the roads out of boredom, and they witnessed the strange lights in the car and watching them descending toward the water surface. Now, in those days, of course, nobody has a cell phone with them. There was a payphone on the road. So they raced up to that, and Laurie went in and called the RCMP. And the first question he has for Laurie is, how much you been drinking?
But what Chris, Laurie, and dozens of other witnesses saw that night was all too real.
He's about to re-enter the vehicle, and suddenly the payphone rings. Laurie answers the phone. Stay there, he goes, we're on the way. And the reason the RCMP called him back is 6 other witnesses had called in from different locations to report the same thing.
Some witnesses describe several blinking lights, some a bright orb. Others claim a mysterious glow emanated from the depths of the ocean. One thing's for sure, something truly inexplicable crashed into Shag Harbor that night, something that could very well be out of this world. The lives of many witnesses, including Chris, would change forever.
The fear subsides, but it becomes replaced with obsession. And the reason for obsession is the need to understand what you've seen. Why do we still not have the answers?
Shag Harbor is a very quiet, small fishing town. Not much happens. And then one night, people wake up to this mysterious crash in their harbor. And shortly thereafter is a massive descent of journalists and police and military.
When this was seen to fall into the ocean, the first reaction was maybe it was a plane crash, which actually made it more important to investigate.
People went out there looking for survivors of this plane crash, they thought.
What they found instead is difficult to forget and even more difficult to explain.
There was this eerie yellow foam stretching for about a half a mile from where the craft had been to possibly moving underwater.
This object submerged under the water, leaving behind a sulfuric smell. And so these witnesses were certainly quite concerned about what they saw.
The military and RCMP spent a lot of time combing the ocean. We do know that divers had gone down there. Nothing had been found.
This really created a mystery for these witnesses, all who had seen certainly some sort of object or vehicle enter into the water.
If it had been a conventional craft that crashed into the water, there should have been wreckage that was found. Something would have turned up. The plane would have been registered as missing.
How does a giant craft disappear without a trace?
It's a small town where everyone knows everyone. They're all going to talk to each other about this. So it's like the rest of the world gets one story, but the people who live there know the full story. They know the real story.
And the real story is a haunting one. The strange foam on the water's surface, the piercing smell of sulfur. Locals start to wonder, what was this craft?
There's many different kinds of stories about what this object may have been. If this was an alien craft that fell into the water, that could then move under the water to different locations, and that's why there was nothing documented or recovered.
Some people in the area swore that under cover of darkness, something was taken out of the ocean, loaded onto a flatbed truck and covered with a tarp and driven away. Further stories that something was actually found under the water but had moved further away from Shag Harbor to an American military base, suggesting that there was some activity going on underwater as well. What exactly was going on, we don't know, but we do have the evidence and the documents to suggest that something unusual occurred at Shag Harbor back in 1967.
The story of the UFO that crashed into Shag Harbor came and went as quickly as the tide, when nothing was found underwater. But for those who saw it, out of sight is not out of mind.
When I got the call from my grandfather in Shag Harbor, I remember him telling me some people didn't go to bed for days. They thought something might come and fall on their house or their equipment or the fishing boat. And I can remember thinking, well, I couldn't believe that nobody had spoken to all the witnesses and pulled the responses together. And I thought, well, I could do that.
In 1992, Chris Stiles dives deep to uncover the origin of the mysterious craft that left him paralyzed with fear as a child.
Nobody was even aware of Shag Harbor whatsoever before I began reinvestigating in 1992.
Chris Stiles went out to try and track down exactly what happened.
He really ferreted out the information and talked to the locals and put together a case far better than anything that the government ever did. They got more government documents relating to Shag Harbor than I believe any other downed UFO incident that we have on record.
"4,000 kilometers south along the coast, decades later, Houston musician Andrew Pena wasn't ready for what he was about to see. In 2014, Houston, Texas was struck with weeks of severe thunder and lightning storms.
It just looked like dark, dense, middle of nowhere ocean. I was on my way to the rehearsal space and I was messing with my phone. I was seeing some crazy stuff happening up in the sky. What is that? Adrenaline was pumping a little bit. Such an eerie kind of feeling. I knew immediately I needed to get off of the highway. I knew right then and there, like I had something just extraordinary.
They had close, personal, and horrifying encounters with unidentified flying objects. Enormous V-shaped craft hovering over homes.
I can't figure it out to this day.
Bright orbs illuminating stormy skies, and suspicious lights disappearing underwater.
The fear had an effect, and it stayed with me.
These terrifying experiences leave behind little tangible evidence and a lot of emotional eyewitnesses searching for answers.
I was just like, there's no way I'm seeing what I think I'm seeing.
A lot of times on an individual basis, what people have seen is so shocking, it's so literally out of this world for them that they actually find a way to forget that they've ever seen it.
For musician Andrew Pena, his UFO event became impossible to forget the moment he grabbed his phone and hit record.
When I reviewed the video, I'm thinking that I only saw the bead of light because in the video it like kind of breaks out into a bunch of little lights And that's the part of me that just goes like, whoa, something had to have been generating that much power in order for you to see it the way you saw it in its clarity. So that was just nuts to me.
What Andrew saw and recorded that night was soon validated by dozens of eyewitnesses around Houston, all reporting the same thing, a cluster of bright lights in the sky.
It was at that moment that I was like, this is so much bigger than I thought it would ever be.
Andrew Pena's video of the mysterious lights over Houston garnered more than 800,000 views online.
That night, it was already on the news.
The encounters Chris and Francis experienced also involved hundreds of people, but were kept out of the public eye for as long as possible.
We still don't know what it was. We still don't know who knows what it was.
The question is, why are some of the biggest, most important UFO sightings being kept a secret?
I think the main reason the government didn't want the public to know is because they didn't want the public to freak out.
Unfortunately, historically, mass sightings have also been equated with mass hysteria. People panicked, that panic spread, and whole cities became delusional.
The Cold War era ushered in a sense of insecurity and resounding fear of what was going on overhead.
Some people still insist that the flying saucer is a secret weapon of Russia. But would a country dare test fly highly secret aircraft over a foreign territory?
It was at this time, I think, that people really started to turn their attention to the skies. What is that flying over? Is that nuclear warfare? Is that an alien? People started paying attention to the skies in a way that they hadn't before.
Are flying saucers interplanetary, or are they a result of mass hysteria?
And one of the explanations that really took hold in the popular imagination was the extraterrestrial. We start hearing stories of people allegedly making contact with alien beings, and those sinister aliens hiding amongst us, disguised as humans.
Governments responded with secrecy to protect the public from hysteria over whatever the invasion may be. Some secrets are still being kept.
You see this reaction by governments frequently to defuse or even just push down the situation and just make sure it doesn't go anywhere.
The mass sightings Francis, Andrew, and Chris experienced were explained to the public as military operations and weather phenomena.
Where there's a will, there's a way, with the government discrediting mass eyewitness accounts, weather balloons, weather phenomena, conventional aircraft. They will come up with something to try to describe it.
And I hear explanations like this. It's impossible not to want to roll my eyes. It's just a way to kind of inoculate the public against something. And so you want to get an explanation out there. And I mean, it's easy peasy to do this. It's called an operation, and it happens all the time.
One of the most well-known alleged operations took place in Roswell, New Mexico.
The story of Roswell is that back in 1947, something crashed. A local resident had found pieces of some sort of unusual material strewn about a field some distance away from his ranch. A news conference was quickly held to show that these pieces were really nothing other than some sort of balloon and radar targets. Nothing to worry about, folks. And yet, the pieces were very much different from what had been seen and felt by the witness himself.
The UFO encounter Chris Stiles and many others witnessed 2 decades later in Nova Scotia bears an eerie resemblance.
Shag Harbor has been described as Canada's Roswell. What's interesting is that it actually has more supportive evidence than Roswell. We have documentation from the RCMP and the Canadian Forces that suggests something really did crash into the ocean.
There's a cover-up as a result of it. That is the case with Roswell, that is the case with Shag Harbor. Something important happened at Shag Harbor, without a doubt.
Chris Stiles is determined to find out what that something was, and he may finally have a break in the case.
I talked to the divers of the Fleet Diving Unit. They were like, well, you know about Shelburne, don't you? You know, that's the real story. Shelburne County has a curious history before that time of anomalous events. Everything from sightings of sea monsters to sightings of Bigfoot.
While a very public investigation was taking place at Shag Harbor, up the coast at Military Base Shelburne, a secret operation yields a shocking discovery.
What the divers told me was when they went down, they found a second UFO in the seabed and that it was rendering assistance to the other one. And the two divers that spoke of this actually claimed that they saw beings in the water doing this. And I'm like, whoa, 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 guys. And suddenly, I was kind of overwhelmed. One of the underwater naval photographers, according to the other officer, shot at least 400 feet of film.
As soon as the footage was brought to the surface, divers were instructed to hand it over.
And of course, none of them ever hear back about what they filmed or what they saw.
What happened to the film shot by those divers? And are the men in black behind its disappearance? UFO encounters can be frightening and emotional experiences. Witnessing a mysterious craft that could be from another planet is a difficult reality to accept.
We have trouble with the unknown. We fear it.
That becomes a scary kind of process, or a scary question to think about.
Even though we have legitimate experiences, we are then afraid to talk about them. We're afraid to kind of tap into something we don't know anything about.
Where did these UFOs come from? And why are they revealing themselves to us now?
I have no idea why extraterrestrials would want to show themselves. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Another one just showed up.
Whoa!
You see that?
No, those are in the sky.
It picked the most populated pathway that it could have possibly picked. So obviously, they wanted to be seen.
But seeing them seems to have dangerous consequences. Missing film from divers at Shag Harbor. Footage of the Phoenix Lights taken by men claiming to work with Councilman Francis Barwood. Whoever these men in black are, they appear to go to great lengths to control evidence of extraterrestrials visiting Earth. Just how far will they go to keep the public in the dark and protect incredible secrets about what really happened over Phoenix that night? After Richard Curtis's tapes of the Phoenix Lights were taken, he went public with his story.
I saw the bottom of it as it went over the top of Phoenix, and it blocked out the clouds and the stars.
News in Phoenix interviewed Richard Curtis, and he told the whole story. Pretty well told him everything that happened. And so after that, I thought, well, I'll talk to him and see if anything else he can remember. Well, he wasn't there anymore. And his neighbor said that they had come for him because he got bad medication, and they took him by ambulance, and they never brought him back.
The last little exclamation point on this whole part of the story is that Richard Curtis himself ended up disappearing. Like, he was just gone.
If the men in black are behind the disappearance of the tapes, could they be behind the disappearance of the man who filmed them?
There certainly is some enticing historical documentation that they certainly did have their hands involved in trying to control how the public thinks about these stories.
The Men in Black phenomenon was first described by a UFO researcher named Greg Barker back in the 1960s. He described that there was these government agents who would go around, they typically wore black, and they would hustle people who were interested in UFOs. They would threaten their lives, they would threaten their families, they would pretend to be from various government organizations, and all with the purpose of covering up the UFO phenomenon, or at least keeping it secret.
Why do we think the men in black showed up at Richard Curtis's home? Because they had advanced intelligence about something. The fact is, it's weird. And that's just the reality. Like, this man is gone. He is a key witness who had very possibly the single most important piece of evidence that may have ever existed on this mass sighting. And he's never seen again.
I'm thinking, how did these two guys know where he was? What do you do? Who can you rely on to investigate and really check things out?
Frances decides to have her phone line inspected by a professional.
This guy checked out my phone, checked out the lines that went up to the pole and everything. Wouldn't come back in my house. Came to the back door. I says, come on in. He goes, no, I'm not coming in. I just want to tell you, yes, your phones are tapped, and it's a government tap.
People think, oh, well, why would the government tap her phone? That's paranoid. That's conspiracy. No, it's not paranoid. It's not conspiracy theory. It's real. This was an important event that, again, threatened to go out of control in public venue. That's the danger of the Phoenix Lights. This thing was on the tipping point of going the other way, of going real sideways for the government.
It's such a puzzle to me, still, always.
Could the government be protecting its people from more than just mass hysteria? Are we in danger of something far more terrifying?
One thing that I've learned about these UFOs is that if they don't want to be seen, you're not going to see them.
So why did these craft choose to be seen?
I can't imagine any practical use other than to terrify people. It's so bizarre. It's so inexplicable. I don't see the box to put that phenomena in.
Perhaps it is a time where we are kind of summoning them. We want to know the truth to such a point that they finally make an appearance in such an obvious, widespread way. There's no question that they do exist, whatever they are, whoever they are, to trigger some sort of official or global response. We don't know what it is. Therefore, we need to protect ourselves.
What was this thing doing, flying all the way south across the entire state that day, that everyone saw it?
We may not understand their intentions of terror or peace, but we can be certain they want us to know they're here. We're entering a new era in UFO understanding and acceptance, validated by incredible mass sightings and driven by the chilling, deeply personal encounters of those involved.
When the rubber meets the road and when you are confronted with the fact that this is actually real, and there's someone who's here that's not supposed to be here, that can scare the hell out of a lot of people.
Today, we're finally addressing this subject from a political perspective. And all the folks that have been reporting experiences for years and years and years are finally being heard.
With the recent release of the Pentagon's investigation into UFOs, we are finally ready to acknowledge their existence and start asking the right questions.
My theory is we're probably being observed.
I do believe, at the very least, in my own lifetime, we'll be able to decipher a little bit more about what we're experiencing.
With a wealth of testimonies from mass sightings, scientists are getting closer than ever before to learning more about the UFOs visiting our planet and their intentions.
All the speculation about life in the universe, visitation, aliens coming to visit, and what messages they have to impart to us, all that is immaterial if we don't have the sightings themselves.
We've come a long way from the silenced mass sightings of past years. Denial, missing evidence, even missing witnesses what happened in the skies over Phoenix still remains a mystery today.
I've got a few more years left, and I'm hoping that I find out all the answers.
And the truth behind what really crashed into Shag Harbor lies hidden below the surface.
As the years go by, none of that testimony has been evaporated, explained, or explained away. The case remains open and unsolved.
As for Andrew Pena's incredible encounter and the new generation of mass sightings still to come, keeping UFOs a secret will be a tall order, even for the most skilled and powerful organizations.
We're going to be seeing more mass sightings. To me, it's an inevitable phenomena. To me, it will always keep happening.
In our age of social media, videos or photos spread like wildfire across the web.
The strength of hundreds of UFO witnesses coming together to report a single sighting is undeniable. Combined with the ability to share these encounters, the truth is unstoppable and change is inevitable.
It's really just opened up a huge Pandora's box in my own mind.
I didn't realize how involved it would end up being. I've had some really bad times and death threats and stuff over the years. I don't regret it at all.
This experience is essentially like with me 100% of the time. That never leaves me.
Whatever it is, wherever the answers come from, once we know we're not alone, we'll have such a greater sense of the significance of these things, of our place in the universe and just how it works. It's still fresh and exciting to me, and I'll never give it up.
Hopefully, at some point in my life, we get the truth, and we get proof of the truth.